So in this video, we're going to talk about financial intermediaries. Recall from earlier videos that these are the type of financial institutions through which savers can indirectly provide funds to borrowers. And the term intermediary basically alludes to the fact that you have some kind of an intermediary that stands in between savers and borrowers. So when savers and borrowers have to interact, they must go through this financial intermediary. Now, the two types of financial intermediaries that we're going to talk about are number one, banks, and two, mutual funds. Let's think about when borrowers and savers have to interact or come into some sort of an agreement, or what type of role could banks play. So typically you have many options when you have to borrow funds, but banks might be very useful in a situation like this. So for instance, if you're an owner of a cafe, so you are an owner of a cafe, and you want to finance the expansion of your business, you could then go to your local bank and take out a loan, and you would be you would have an IOU, like some kind of a document that tells you about your indebtedness. This stands for IOU, this type of an abbreviation, which is going to specify the principal, the interest rate, and by when do you have to return that money or that loan. Okay, so banks are typically useful in such a circumstance where maybe you are dealing with a small business, but if you were to think about going to the stock or the bond market, you would probably fail at that, because most buyers of stocks and bonds would prefer to buy stocks and bonds that are issued by larger and more popular or more familiar companies. And that typically signals quality or credibility. A cafe owner is unlikely to get its finances from the stock or the bond market. Okay, so it's very useful that for the cafe owner, they could go to the go get a business expansion just by getting a loan from the local bank. So the primary job of banks is to take in deposits from people who want to save and use these deposits to make loans to people who want to borrow. Banks would pay depositors some interest rate, right? So if you deposit the money in the bank, they offer you some interest rate, and typically this interest rate that they give you is lower than the interest rate that they charge borrowers. And it is the differential in the interest rate that is used to cover some of the bank costs and also to return some profits to the owners of the bank. But there are other types of roles that banks can play in the economy. Typically, they would facilitate any purchases of goods and services, so that people can use their debit cards and credit cards, so that they can transact easily every day. Or the banks can also provide some sort of security in keeping your investment portfolio. If you invested in stocks and bonds, they could also hold that for you. But we'll talk about that later. So let's turn to the other type of financial intermediary called mutual funds. Now, mutual funds are a type of financial intermediary that are very popular in the US economy. In fact, let me define that first, and I will tell you how these are used. So mutual funds are a type of financial institution that sell shares or stocks to the public to buy a portfolio of stocks and bonds. You must have heard about the saying that don't put all your eggs in one basket. This is sort of signifying the same principle where you may not want to buy the only thing you might not want to own is Facebook stock or Microsoft stock, because something might happen to Facebook in the future, but you might actually want to diversify the risk by holding a large variety of stocks and bonds. And therefore, you would face less risk because you only have a small stake or a small ownership in each company. So mutual funds, in other words, would make diversification easy. So the shareholder of a mutual fund accepts all the risk and return associated with their portfolio. Right? So just like when you were investing in stocks and bonds, you would still incur that same risk in this case. But the risk, so the same risk in the sense of not the magnitude of the risk is a lot higher when you're just investing in one stock or one bond, but the risk is a lot lower in this case. But you are accepting the risk and return that comes from holding that portfolio. Okay, so the advantage of mutual funds that people with small amounts of money are able to diversify their portfolio. And the second advantage is that you're able to access the skills of professional money managers. Now, in the US, you have so many different types of companies that would issue you mutual funds, and some of these companies you've heard of, like Vanguard, TIAA, CREF, Fidelity, Charles Schwab, etc. So all of these companies you could go to, and a Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, you can go to these companies, start an investment account and invest in mutual funds. So here the idea is that you can diversify with small amounts of money, and you can get access to professional money managers that can guide you about this. Now, there are a lot of people who say that, including Warren Buffett, that just investing in index funds, which is a type of mutual fund, which buys all the stocks in a given stock index is a good thing to do. Typically, people like Warren Buffett suggest that you should not go to professional money managers, but rather invest in some kind of an index fund which reflects how the entire stock market is doing. The idea here is that these index funds typically would outperform. So they typically outperform mutual funds that are managed by money managers. A lot of money managers claim that they can beat the market, but data shows that index funds actually perform or outperform some of the stocks or bonds or portfolios that are picked by money managers. By investing in index funds, you're able to keep the costs low, and you are buying and selling only rarely, and you don't have to pay the salaries of professional money managers. So typically index funds would have a low expense ratios. This is more of a technical term in finance, but we will worry less about that. So this is a very advantageous when it comes to when it comes to investing.